Open Forum 2, Test 4, Part 1. Read questions 1 through 3. Then listen to the news report and choose the correct answer for each question.
And now our reporter Jamie Torres has an interesting science and nature story about trees.
Hi, Caitlin. I'm standing in the Tilden Nature Area in Berkeley, California. There are several redwood trees near me. They all look pretty similar to me, but one of the trees is special because it's a moon tree.
What's a moon tree?
It's a tree grown from a seed that has traveled to the moon and back.
Really? How did that happen? Was it an accident?
No, not at all. An astronaut took them along. It was in 1971 on the Apollo 14 mission. An astronaut named Stuart Roosa was on the trip. Before he became an astronaut, he had been a firefighter with the U.S. Forest Service. He loved nature and trees in particular. Each astronaut on the trip was allowed to bring some personal items along. Mr. Roosa chose to bring some tree seeds. He chose some redwood tree seeds because it's such a well-known tree. Then he chose other varieties of trees because they would grow in many different parts of the country. Now, tree seeds may seem like a kind of strange choice, but it makes more sense if you remember that at that time, they didn't have all that much information about how space travel might affect certain living things. The Forest Service loved the idea. It was an opportunity for research for them. They wanted to find out what would happen to the seeds after they'd been to the moon and back. People honestly didn't know what might happen, whether the seeds would sprout and grow normally, whether the seeds would have been affected in a strange way, whether they'd become some kind of mutant tree or something. And finally, of course, there was the possibility that the seeds wouldn't grow because of their travel.
So obviously at least one grew.
Yes, that's right. None of the tree seeds ever left the space module, but they orbited the moon 34 times before they came back. Then they had to be decontaminated. Unfortunately, during that process, the canister broke and the seeds scattered all over. They didn't know if they were damaged or not, but most of the seeds germinated and the trees appeared to grow normally. In 1975, the Forest Service was ready to let the trees leave the lab, and everybody wanted them. Trees were sent to the White House. Senators wanted them to use to dedicate buildings all over the United States. One was sent to the Emperor of Japan. And there was a tree planted in both Switzerland and Brazil. They didn't have enough trees for their requests. Nowadays, this is obviously quite interesting, historically. But the problem is that they didn't keep clear records when they were distributing the trees, so no one knows where they all went.
That's too bad.
Yes, it really is. There were hundreds of seeds that may have grown into trees, really all over. Now, there was usually a ceremony when the trees were planted, so there's often a sign or plaque nearby. So sometimes people find them accidentally when they notice a sign. I'm not sure how this redwood that I'm standing next to was found. Anyway, there are now people who are interested in finding the moon trees. A man named Dave Williams has a website to keep track of all the moon trees that have been found. I think there are at least 60 trees listed in different parts of the country. These trees, especially the redwoods, could live for a very long time. Redwoods can live for thousands of years, so it would be nice to have a record of the ones that went to the moon.
But of the moon trees they found, there doesn't appear to be anything different about them, right?
Yes. As I mentioned, this one here certainly looks just like any other redwood tree around here. And from what I've heard, there haven't been any differences in the trees. Of course, there wasn't any DNA analysis available in the early 1970s. We don't know if that would show any subtle differences.
I'm curious, Jamie. If Stuart Roosa chose tree seeds to take to space on that trip, what did the other astronauts choose to take?
Well, there was some variety. Things like coins and stamps were popular. If you remember Alan Shepard, who actually walked on the moon on that mission, he brought golf balls, and then he used a geology tool as a club to golf on the moon. On one trip, an astronaut carried a corned beef sandwich.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you very much, Jamie. We'll all have to keep